You stand at the edge of what used to be a swamp, hard to believe. Right here, in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, where glass and steel once pierced the clouds. Your feet would have sunk into the muck if you'd been standing here 400 years ago. The land beneath the Twin Towers wasn't always land at all. It was watery, marshy, humming with insects and the slow swirl of brackish tides. And it wasn't even solid when it became land. No, it was filled, like stuffing into a goose. Human hands carved out a shoreline and pushed it further into the Hudson River. Dumping debris, ballast stones from ships, wooden pilings, and landfill layer upon layer. Until eventually, it could carry weight. That's right, much of Lower Manhattan was man-made, stitched together like a quilt of old worlds. Under the Twin Towers, the land had a secret history of being unnaturally natural. Honestly, when I first read this story, I had to pause and just sit with it for a while, because you don't think of sky-high buildings starting at sea level, or even below it. You don't think of skyscrapers as resting on soggy, man-altered terrain. But here's the twist they do. They did. If this kind of story hits you like it hit me, consider subscribing and, hey, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, or just say hi. I read them all, especially the ones with cat emojis. All right, now let's slow things down and step into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, boots squishing into what was once tidal marsh, where reeds swayed in salty wind and egrets perched like little white ghosts. Picture it, 1609. Henry Hudson's ship, the Half Moon, bobbing offshore. No blinking billboards, no taxis honking, just gulls, driftwood, and the smell of wet earth. The island the Lenape called Mannahatta is lush and wild, the air thick with pine and promise. The southern tip, the spot where the towers would one day rise, is the lowest part of the island. So, when the Dutch arrived, they drained it, built canals, and pounded wooden pilings into the muck to create new ground. Some of those wooden pilings, believe it or not, are still there today, preserved under the waterline, protected from rot by oxygen-free soil. And if you're imagining this land as delicate or fragile, it still kind of is. That's why, hundreds of years later, the Port Authority had to dig deep when they started planning the Twin Towers. They weren't just placing skyscrapers, they were anchoring them to the very bones of the island. But let's pause there for a sensory moment. Imagine standing on this half-sunk shoreline in 1720. You're a dock worker's apprentice. The air is dense with fish guts, tobacco smoke, and the tang of rotting seaweed. The wooden planks beneath you creak with each step, and rats the size of small dogs, you're convinced, dart between barrels. Somewhere, a church bell rings, but it's muffled by fog. Everything feels damp, like the city hasn't dried out since birth. Fast forward, by the mid-1800s. This once marshy corner had become crowded with docks and piers. Sailors came and went. Ships dumped cargo and ballast stones that came from all over the world. Used to stabilize vessels and then tossed aside. They ended up under the cobblestones, part of the patchwork fill, a mix of Caribbean coral, Irish granite, African sandstone. It's like the world left pebbles here as a calling card. Historians still argue whether the earliest landfill was intentional or accidental. Did the Dutch have a coordinated plan? Or did they just keep tossing stuff until they ran out of swamp? You can picture them. Oh, just chuck it in there, Jan. It'll be fine. And somehow, it was, for a while. But the real challenge came in the 20th century. Because once plans began for the World Trade Center in the 1960s, the question wasn't just where to build, it was how. How do you build the tallest buildings on the eastern seaboard in a place that used to be soup? Cue the slurry wall. Now, this sounds like a villain from a Batman comic, but I promise it's real and incredible. Engineers dug a deep trench around the entire foundation site and filled it with bentonite slurry, a thick, goopy mixture that holds back water. Then they dropped steel cages in, poured concrete in, and the slurry oozed out, making way for a waterproof retaining wall. It's called the bathtub, and yes, it's exactly as glamorous as it sounds. This bathtub kept the Hudson River from flooding the foundations, essentially creating a giant dry box in which the tower's foundations could be built. And it's still there, still holding back the water even after everything else changed. There's something strangely poetic about that. Don't you think the wall designed to keep water out ended up holding memory and want a quirky tidbit? Okay, there's a theory, half whispered in engineering circles, that some of the fill beneath the site contains relics from ships that sank in the harbor. Not dumped cargo hold ships, buried beneath layers of buildings, cobblestones, and concrete. You might be walking over a Dutch merchant vessel and never know it. And so, as you walk forward, the skyline long gone, your steps echo softly in this imagined sublayer of time. You're not just tracing the ghosts of buildings, you're walking on centuries of stories stacked like sediment. As the night deepens, something glints faintly in the dark soil ahead. A brass hinge, a broken bottle, or maybe part of a long-lost hull, swallowed by the swamp-turned city and forgotten under 40 feet of concrete ambition. But you keep going, because just ahead, beneath those vanished towers, lies something stranger still. A labyrinth once carved into the bedrock, twisting iron rails, platforms, and a station that time tried to erase. You step forward and suddenly your boot scrapes against iron. Not just a pipe or some rusted rod, this is track. Smooth worn and faintly glimmering under a dusting of centuries. You crouch low and trace it with your fingers. The cold is sharp, biting, and it pulses with something familiar, like the hum of motion that once rattled through these rails every day. You are standing in what used to be the sub-basement of a city within a city, a buried station. A forgotten terminal. A place where trains once arrived beneath the world's most famous skyscrapers. Back in the early 1900s, before the Twin Towers, and before even Rockefeller's dreams of business empires. This site was part of a sprawling underground maze of tracks and tunnels. You're in the realm of the Hudson and Manhattan Railroad. Yes, the H&M, a predecessor to today's PATH trains. It's weird to think about now, but for decades, the area under where the towers would later be wasn't just supporting buildings, it was moving. Trains slithered in and out like mechanical snakes, carrying thousands of passengers in and out of the city every day. This area buzzed with motion. Even as the surface world above changed from fish market to finance, and nestled in the tangle of steel below was a strange, almost mythic place, the Hudson Terminal. Hudson Terminal isn't just some subway stop with bad lighting and gum under the seats. No, this was a grand Beaux-Arts structure, completed in 1908, that occupied 2 full city blocks, above ground. It had twin office towers, ironic foreshadowing, right and underground. A station so vast it was often mistaken for part of Grand Central. The tunnels burrowed deep into the bedrock, reinforced with thick concrete and steel, leading trains under the Hudson River from New Jersey right into lower Manhattan. Imagine being one of those early commuters stepping off a sleek, brass-trimmed electric train into a station echoing with footsteps and the hiss of steam. The walls were tiled in creamy white, the ceilings curved and arching. For a moment, it probably felt like entering the future. The smell would have been a mix of oil, hot metal, and perfume people wore their finest, even to travel underground. There's a faint whisper of music, too. Maybe a violinist playing near the stairwell for spare change. It was gritty, yes, but it was alive. And now, you're standing in its bones. Here's a mainstream historical fact for you. Hudson Terminal was demolished to make way for the World Trade Center. The tracks were reworked, the station rebuilt deeper underground, and the old entrances sealed shut forever. Or, well, mostly sealed. Because some urban explorers whisper about a section that was never properly closed off, a hidden spur, a pocket of the past, entombed below the foundation. Historians still argue whether that hidden portion exists. The MTA denies it. The Port Authority shrugs. But a few blurry photos circulate online arched tunnels with original signage, now graffiti tagged and water streaked, supposedly taken through maintenance hatches. One even shows an old wooden bench, still upright, as if someone only just stepped away. Quirky detail time during excavation for the towers in the 1960s. Workers kept finding odd things beneath the tracks. Old ceramic insulators, leather suitcases, a bundle of 1930s newspapers completely preserved in dry soil, with headlines about bank runs and miracle cures for baldness. One laborer joked it was like unearthing a subway time capsule. Another refused to go back down after swearing he saw a man-shaped shadow dart between beams. Hey, cities keep secrets. Emotionally, there's something heavy about being down here. The stillness feels wrong, like you've stumbled into a party long after everyone left. The walls remember movement. They ache for it. And so do you, a little. You reach the platform edge. It's cracked now. A jagged line between here and then. You imagine the trains that once pulled in with a screech and sigh. Doors folding open, lives unfolding with them, first dates, bitter farewells, urgent briefcases, a grandmother clutching her Sunday hat. Now, only the faintest tremor remains. Somewhere far below, the modern path trains still rumble past, deeper and faster, unaware of the ghost station just above. But occasionally, so say the maintenance crews, you can feel a strange echo. Not just a train, a presence. It's all too easy to forget that before the Twin Towers. There was this world beneath them, a hidden city of iron and steam that served millions and then vanished. Brick by brick. The tunnels themselves are a marvel. Some are still in use, some are lost, and some may never have been fully mapped. There's even a rumor, completely unverified but deliciously persistent, that a forgotten train still sits abandoned on a sealed track beneath the site, covered in dust, graffiti on the windows, waiting for a green light that will never come. And you wonder, would it still run? If you found the right switch, as you step away from the rails, something catches your eye, a coil of wire, old and brittle, resting near the edge of a support beam. You pick it up, feel the crust of time flake off in your palm. It smells faintly of ozone and heat, the kind of wire used in radios, maybe. And just like that, the air changes. There's a faint buzzing in your ears, like static from an old speaker. You turn, and before you now stretches a corridor, lined with boxes and cables and old shop signs. You've stumbled into what used to be called Radio Row, a street that no longer exists. Buried beneath towers and time, you duck under a low beam, and suddenly, the ground crunches beneath your boots, not stone, not glass, but bakelite, fragments of knobs, tubes, switch plates, 1,000 tiny voices from the past that once lit up and crackled with electricity. You've wandered into the ghost of Radio Row, the neighborhood sacrifice to build the World Trade Center. And here, under layers of progress and politics, its bones still hum with stories. Imagine this, the year is 1947. You're strolling down Cortlandt Street, right where the Twin Towers would eventually be planted. But now, instead of steel monoliths, the skyline around you is low and buzzing. Shops crowd shoulder to shoulder. Signs hang from every awning. Surplus electronics vacuum tubes, 10 CSI, transistors while they last. The sidewalks are cluttered with crates, parts, and giddy young men with screwdrivers in their back pockets and dreams of building the next great gadget in their garages. It smells like solar, dust, and ambition. And it sounds like the future. Radios buzz with shortwave signals. Oscilloscopes flash in storefronts. Salesmen shout over the noise of jazz pouring from every open door. If you needed a part, this was the place. And if you didn't need it, well, Radio Row convinced you that you might, if not today. Then, maybe after a good night of tinkering. There's a mainstream historical fact worth savoring. Radio Row was one of the first American neighborhoods completely erased by eminent domain. In 1966, the Port Authority used its power to seize over 13 acres of downtown land to build the World Trade Center. More than 300 businesses were displaced, many of them mom-and-pop radio supply shops. They were told to pack up and get out. Some were compensated, many weren't. Lawsuits flew like sparks from a soldering iron. And yet, some fragments remain, not just in memory, but literally in the soil. You kneel down and pull aside a slab of broken concrete. Beneath it, an old plastic radio dial. The numbers still legible through the grime. It's tuned to 7:20 a.m. What was playing when it was buried? A Yankees game? A Cold War? Broadcast the smoky croon of Billie Holiday. Historians still argue whether Radio Row's destruction marked the true start of the urban renewal movement's darker side, or just another chapter in New York's ever-churning evolution. Either way, it left behind more than crushed storefronts. It erased a culture, a rhythm, a weird little haven for nerds before nerd was even a thing. Here's a quirky tidbit legend has it. Steve Jobs' biological father once worked in Radio Row. Another tale says a teenage Paul Simon wandered these streets buying amplifier parts. No one's confirmed either story, but let's be honest. It feels true, doesn't it? As you walk through the ruins of Radio Row, it's easy to feel a strange nostalgia for a place you never visited. Maybe it's the idea of it, a city inside a city, where circuits were king, and everyone believed the future could be built with just the right wire and enough curiosity. You stop at what used to be 63 Cortlandt Street. It's not marked anymore. Nothing is. But if you close your eyes, you can almost hear the bell over the door, the floor creaking as you step inside, and someone calling out from behind a mountain of parts. What you looking for today? Chief, emotionally. This section of the city carried a different kind of magic. It wasn't lofty like Wall Street. It wasn't old money elegant. It was scrappy, loud, brimming with invention. And when the demolition orders came, many of those shop owners wept not for lost profits, but for lost identity. It wasn't just stores, it was their world. You pass by the ghost of a display window. It's shattered now, but behind it, arranged with careful precision, are the remnants of a display, an old Zenith radio, its front panel chipped but proud. Next to a cardboard cutout of a spaceman holding a transistor. The sign says we're ready for the future in fading block letters. Funny thing is, they were just not in the way they thought. The further you go, the more tangled it gets. Coaxial cables like vines. Boxes of vacuum tubes sealed in wax. A rusted sign that reads Dumont swings gently from an unseen breeze. You step over a half-buried catalog, and the paper crumbles like pastry under your boot. And that's when you notice something odd, the sound. Or rather, the lack of it. No rats, no dripping pipes, just silence, thick and full. Then, a faint hum. You follow it, turning through another half-collapsed corridor, and it gets louder. Not mechanical musical, the unmistakable warble of a theremin, that eerie, swooping sound, like a ghost trying to sing in Morse code. It seems to be coming from a room just ahead. You step inside, and the air changes. There, on a low table, is a working radio. Impossible, but real. It's glowing softly, tubes alive, filaments lit like fireflies. And from its speaker comes a wavering melody, one you recognize but can't place. The signal crackles, fades, then sharpens again. The dial is still set to 7:20 a.m. You lean in. hand hovering over the knob, wondering what will happen if you touch it. Change the frequency, change the memory, but before you decide, a sudden breeze brushes past you, warm and dry, smelling of limestone and old bricks. You turn, and the radio is dark again. Where did that breeze come from? You follow it, deeper underground, where Radio Row's wires thin out and the smell shifts from electronic musk to something older, dustier, charred. Ahead lies the memory of an even earlier time. Not circuits and radios, but smoke, musket fire, the shouts of redcoats and revolutionaries. You're heading into the past buried beneath the past. You're about to stumble into the remnants of forts that guarded this very point before towers, before trains, before even the United States had a name. You press onward, and the air begins to feel heavier, not with humidity, but with memory. Something older clings to the space here. The walls change subtly. Pipes give way to stone, dust to soot. It smells like old firewood, ash, and damp earth, an ancient hearth that hasn't burned in centuries. The cables of Radio Row have vanished behind you, replaced by the rougher texture of quarried rock, blackened in places where torches once flickered. You're not in the industrial past anymore. You've slipped even further back into the 1700s, into the deep, often overlooked belly of colonial New York, and under where the Twin Towers once stood. You are now tracing the outlines of Fort George. Few remember Fort George. Even fewer could point to where it once stood. But this land lower Manhattan was a battleground long before the stock tickers and security turnstiles moved in. First, the Dutch, then the English, then the Americans, fighting to become Americans. And all of it played out in the footprints of bastions and ramparts, often built, rebuilt, and buried over with each passing regime. You press your palm to the wall and feel the rough outline of brick irregular, handmade, colonial. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Fort George was the final name for a series of military fortifications constructed by European powers from the early 1600s through the late 1700s. Its various versions stood guard at the southern tip of Manhattan, controlling access to the harbor and protecting the fledgling city of New Amsterdam, later New York. But this fort wasn't always just a defensive station. It was also a prison, a garrison, and, according to some dusty accounts, a place of execution. You round a corner, and suddenly you're standing inside what feels like the hollowed-out shell of a powder magazine. The ceiling is low, the walls are thick. The scent of sulfur and damp gunpowder is faint, like a memory trying to manifest. Emotionally, it hits like a thud in your chest. These were not grand times for the people caught within these walls during British occupation of New York and the Revolutionary War. Fort George, then under British control, served as one of the many makeshift prisons for American captives. Cold, overcrowded, and dark. Some never made it out. Historians still argue whether Fort George's prison chambers extended under what would become the World Trade Center site, but one unearthed 18th century map, stashed in a Yale archive, suggests the fort's subterranean arm stretched further north than previously believed, right into what would become the tower's foundations. There's a quirky twist buried here too, literally. While demolishing nearby buildings in the 1920s, workers discovered a sealed vault containing muskets, ceremonial sabers, and what appeared to be a British officer's red coat, remarkably preserved in a tin-lined trunk. It wasn't officially linked to Fort George, but the timing and location were suspiciously close. That trunk, by the way, vanished, misfiled, or maybe just kept. You run your hand along the brickwork and feel a shallow carving a symbol, almost erased. A crude anchor. Was it graffiti? A prisoner's mark? A sailor's prayer etched before deployment? There's a strange silence in here. Not peaceful, reverent, maybe, and full of that weird New York irony, how much blood and anguish lies underground that, centuries later, would be occupied by brokers yelling into phones about pork belly futures. Suddenly, your foot catches on something. You kneel, brushing aside decades of dust, and find a rusted iron ring bolted into the stone floor. It looks like the kind used to shackle prisoners, or tether horses, or hoist cargo. Either way, it's a point of restraint, a point of permanence. You hesitate, then tug on it. Nothing happens, but the sound clink echoes longer than it should, as if there's hollow space beneath, a forgotten chamber, or just your imagination. You lean close, listening, and that's when you hear the faintest sound. Not the radio hum from before, not the buzz of electricity. Drums, soft, distant, military. Maybe it's the acoustics, maybe it's your nerves, but the beat is unmistakable, a slow, deliberate cadence. Boom, boom, boom. You step back, and then forward, unsure whether you're approaching history or just being swallowed by it. The light dims, or maybe your eyes are adjusting. You're beginning to see outlines in the darkness, timbers scorched by fire, a collapsed tunnel mouth, and, oddly, fragments of a cartwheel, which makes sense when you consider this in the 1800s. After Fort George fell to disuse and the land was regraded, this area became a center for trade. Wagons crisscrossed the cobbled streets above, loaded with goods from ships docked nearby. And guess what got stored down here? Everything. Tea, silk, coal, whale oil, molasses, salted cod, you name it. Somewhere in this network of catacombs, you're brushing up against the 19th century warehouse layers now. The transition is slow, but clear stone to brick, brick to timber, timber to crates rotted and split, but still recognizable. You kick one open gently. Inside dirt, and under that, cloves. Yes, cloves. The sharp medicinal smell is unmistakable. Spices like these were stored in bulk here before being sent up to apothecaries and kitchens all across Manhattan. And just for a moment, the air is fragrant again, spicy and sweet and old. There's something comforting about that, amid all this buried conflict and forgotten machinery. A scent of something soft, something human. But then your hand brushes against another box, and the scent changes. Charcoal, burnt parchment. You pull it open, black ash. Nothing left but dust and a few metal buttons. Melted flat. Whatever was here didn't just decay, it was burned. Maybe in one of the many fires that tore through lower Manhattan. Maybe something else. The wall beside it is scorched too, and a faint scorch-marked message is visible if you squint hard enough. They took it below, took what you stare at the words. You feel the temperature drop a little. You wonder if it's the wind or breath. You can't be sure, and just then, another doorway appears arched, narrow, and carved with a date, 1804. No explanation, just the year. That's your path now, a new chapter in the understory. One that leads not just to trade or tunnels, but something even more unexpected. Because what lies beyond isn't man-made at all. It's something geological, a natural feature that may have influenced the placement of everything built above it. Something the Lenape may have known, something city planners may have ignored, and something that's still shifting, even now. You step through the arched doorway marked 1804, and the air changes again, drastically. Gone is the scent of char and spice. Now, it's earth, pure, damp, living soil. Like the breath of the planet itself, you feel a temperature drop. But it's not unpleasant, it's the coolness of a cave after sunlight. A pause. A hush. And just beyond this next stretch of stone lies something most people never imagined existed under the Twin Towers, a natural cave system, tucked quietly beneath centuries of noise. That's right, under all the concrete and steel, beneath the empire of commerce, lies a forgotten anomaly in Manhattan's otherwise dense, Urban geology, a shallow, serpentine cavern network once known only to the Lenape, the original people of this land. There's no marker, no museum, but here it is an undulating stretch of glacial stone, shaped before even the idea of New York had formed. You run your fingers along the jagged wall. It's not cut by hand. It's ancient, formed by retreating ice sheets thousands of years ago. The rock is veined with quartz and flecks of mica, shimmering faintly in the low light. You pause and just listen, and for once, there's no hum of electricity, no echoes of commerce or conquest, just the slow, rhythmic drip of mineral water into some unseen pool. The earth, speaking in its own slow language, here's a mainstream historical fact that sounds too strange to be true during early excavations in lower Manhattan. Construction crews discovered sections of bedrock with formations inconsistent with the rest of the island. One engineer even noted in a 1912 field report that a section beneath the battery appears to breathe damp air, as if hollow. No official follow-up ever made the news. And yet here you are, breathing it in, emotionally. It hits differently here. The chaos of city life above fades, and you start to think about time not in minutes or decades, but in eras, all that human effort layered above this space wars. Towers, subways, and below it all, this ancient quiet. You press forward, your boots crunching over crystalline sand. The ceiling lowers, then rises again, and just when you think it's going to close in entirely, the space opens, a dome of rock, slick with condensation. In the center is a pool, still, black, perfect. Its surface reflects the walls and your face like a mirror, but distorted, like the city itself is peering back at you from an older age. You crouch and dip your fingers into the pool. The water is cold, shockingly cold, and still clean. That's another whisper from the past. This may be one of the last remaining remnants of Manhattan's original freshwater system. Before the Croton Aqueduct, before the sewer grid, this island's people drank from streams, springs, and caves like this one. The Lenape called one such spring Mannahatta, island of many hills, and some believe this water right here was part of that system. Historians still argue whether the cave system beneath lower Manhattan was once larger, connecting streams and springs from the Battery to what's now Tribeca. Some suggest that the slow collapse of certain tunnels in the 1800s was due to ground instability caused by undermining these water features. Others argue the caves were too small to influence construction. But then again, the evidence is buried. Literally. You notice faint carvings on the wall's symbols, circles inside of circles, hands, stylized birds, petroglyphs, or graffiti from some long-gone spelunker. You're not sure, but they feel intentional, almost sacred. You trace one gently, and it flakes slightly under your touch, ancient pigment turning to dust. And now, here comes your quirky fact for the night in the early 1970s. A WTC janitor named Reggie claimed he found a hollowed-out rock chamber beneath one of the elevator shafts during routine inspection. He swore it echoed like a cathedral, smelled like metal and moss, and even saw fish without eyes in a pool. Most people laughed, said he was drunk. But one other man, an electrical subcontractor, later admitted he found something similar. Neither account was followed up by officials. Of course, you're now standing in a place that fits both descriptions. And then something strange happens. A ripple, just one. The water in the pool breaks, spreads, then stills again. You didn't move. There's no breeze, but the ripple was real. You feel that tickle on the back of your neck, part the curiosity, part alarm. You whisper, "Hello," and it echoes back, mockingly. "Hello, hello, hello." But the voice that returns is different, slower, warmer, as if something in this cave, or someone, heard you and chose to answer in kind. You step back, heart thudding. It's probably just acoustics. Just the shape of the space. But still, you look down and see that the ripple has left something bobbing at the edge of the water. A small, flat stone. On it, etched with delicate lines, is a symbol, a spiral inside a triangle. A guidepost, a warning, a prayer. You pocket it, unsure why, and then, almost reluctantly, you turn away from the pool and head down another tunnel, this one rising slightly. The walls shift again. From raw stone to fitted brick, you're leaving the natural world and re-entering something man-made. And now you hear it, a steady hum, not mystical, mechanical, like turbines or old ventilation fans. And closer still, the rhythmic clank-clank of wheels on rail. That's your next layer, the hidden rail lines that once fed this part of the city. Because under the Twin Towers, before the marble floors and revolving doors, there was a thundering artery of iron. You follow the sound, and with every step, the quiet of the cave fades and the ghost of industry grows louder. You're about to step into the bones of a rail system that carried coal, coffee, and human ambition straight through the underbelly of Manhattan, a place forgotten even by most city planners today. But those rails, they're still there, and they still lead somewhere. You step forward, one boot clanking softly on something metallic beneath a layer of dust. The hum is clearer now, more deliberate, mechanical. It pulses like an old heartbeat, echoing from a tunnel just ahead. You duck under a low archway, and suddenly you're standing on iron tracks, two parallel lines running off into the dark, embedded in worn, cracked stone. Here it is, the Hudson Terminal Railway infrastructure, ancestor of the modern path system. Once a marvel of subterranean engineering, and now a mostly buried secret beneath where the Twin Towers rose, long before anyone uttered the phrase World Trade Center. These rails brought thousands of commuters, laborers, and dreamers into lower Manhattan each day, tucked beneath the city like blood vessels under skin. You run your hand along the rusted rail, feeling the iron chill against your palm. It's easy to miss the romance of it amid all the grime and corrosion. But if you squint just right, you can almost see it: bowler hats and lunch pails, polished shoes on wooden platforms, the hiss of steam and the cough of engines echoing against tiled walls. Mainstream historical fact, the Hudson and Manhattan Railroad, opened in 1908, was one of the earliest high-capacity electric train systems in the U.S., and the twin-towered Hudson Terminal above it was, for a while, the largest office building in the world, massive, ornate, and built right on top of the tracks you're standing on now. But here's the twist. These lines didn't just serve passengers. Oh no. You follow them around a bend, where the tunnel expands into a long-forgotten spur track. At its terminus, a rust-covered freight car. Its doors cracked open just enough to reveal crates stamped with faded lettering, Caoba, Guatemala. Mahogany, furniture grade, imported, left here. Why? According to one fringe rumor, this track spur once served an off-the-books loading station used by select merchants, maybe even intelligence services, to discreetly receive international goods without customs entanglement. It's never been proven. No records remain, but the car is here. The crates are real, and the mahogany, while brittle, still smells faintly sweet. You pry open another crate. Inside, upholstery nails, brass, elegant, designed for chairs no one ever sat in. Historians still argue whether the freight spur beneath the Hudson Terminal was ever used for anything more than construction supplies. Some believe it was part of a failed plan to turn lower Manhattan into a hub for underground cargo transfer, one that collapsed after the Great Depression shifted funding elsewhere. But when you see the infrastructure down here, the reinforced walls, the ventilation ducts, the pulley systems, you start to wonder, maybe that plan did get off the ground. Just quietly. You reach the far end of the tunnel, where the rail ends abruptly in a pile of gravel and a massive, rusted gate. Beyond it, a breeze. You press your hand to the gate, and it groans open just enough to squeeze through, and suddenly, you're not in a train tunnel anymore. You're in a room, a wide, circular chamber, lined with concrete columns, with a ceiling that curves upward into a perfect dome. The acoustics are perfect. Your breath bounces back at you with crystal clarity, and in the center of the room, a vault door. Wide, round, sealed. There's no label, no keypad, just a wheel, bolted with iron. That looks like it hasn't turned in decades. You hesitate, of course you do, but your hands move anyway. The wheel resists, then turns with a groan, metal against metal. Old grease straining to come back to life, and with a final click, the vault door swings inward. Inside is darkness, but a charged kind of darkness, like it's been waiting. You step through and find paper, stacks and stacks of it, in metal drawers and battered boxes, schematics, inventory lists, letters. Some of it crumbles when you touch it. The ink faded to ghosts, but enough remains. This wasn't just a storage room. This was an archive. You lift a folder from one of the drawers. The heading reads Trade Delegation, 1962, Cairo. Inside, handwritten memos about textile tariffs, suspicious gifts exchanged, and a curious note Route 17 must remain undisclosed. Avoid public exposure. What was Route 17? You pull another file. This one labeled Port Authority Unauthorized Access Protocols. It outlines specific procedures to escort and neutralize any intruders found beneath the terminal. The language is vague. Chilling, and there it is again. That spiral inside triangle symbol you found in the cave. Now stamped in the top corner of the document. A callback, a thread. You sit for a moment, stunned. This hidden room beneath the track seems to link to the cave system. But why you don't get long to wonder. The lights dim as they are flicker, then buzz, then die. You're in total darkness. You reach instinctively for your flashlight. It flickers on, casting long shadows over the vault walls. You turn slowly, breathing shallow. That's when you see something scribbled behind a filing cabinet. Only visible now because of the way the beam hits the concrete. Vault 2A, keep shut. Chamber unstable. You glance behind you. That's this vault. Instinct says leave. Curiosity says stay. But it's more than just curiosity now. It's momentum. You've come this far, seen this much. This story, it isn't just about tunnels and trains. It's about something deeper. Because beyond this vault, past the archives and the forgotten rails, lies one final door. A narrow, iron-framed archway just behind the vault, almost hidden. And above it, an inscription, worn almost smooth by time. You brush away the dust. It reads Foundation Zero. What is that, a code name? A warning. A relic of city planning or something more. You step toward it. The rail tracks behind you hum one last time, as if exhaling. The city is watching, listening, and beneath the towers. You've nearly reached the core. You duck beneath the low, iron archway labeled Foundation Zero, feeling the air grow even colder this time with a sterile, metallic edge, like chilled rebar or a hospital corridor left to decay. Your flashlight beam catches the floor, not rock, not concrete, but something smoother, engineered like glass, but matte and dark as obsidian. You've stepped out of the railroad past and into a different kind of silence, one that feels managed, intended. Not natural quiet, but imposed quiet, like a soundproofed room where secrets echo louder than noise. Your footfalls dull into soft taps. The corridor is narrow, yet every surface gleams with some unknown coating that reflects dim light in odd, almost oily hues. The walls curve gently inward, funneling your path forward, not like a hallway, but like a vein guiding blood to a heart. And then you see it. A door, simple, White, no markings except a red circle, centered and deliberate. Painted right at eye level. You press it open, half expecting to trigger an alarm, but nothing happens, no siren, no click, just the slow, whispery sigh of pressure releasing. The room inside is vast. Circular again, and unlike anything you've seen beneath the city, here, steel dominates ribs of it arcing over your head, as though you're standing inside the skeleton of a giant, sleeping animal. At the center a dais, and on it, a map, not of the city above, but something deeper, older. It looks like a hybrid of subway lines, geological fault zones, and ley lines. Really? You rub your eyes. There are faint sigils overlaying the paths, symbols not from any modern blueprint you've seen. Some match the triangle spiral from the cave. Others resemble cartographic glyphs used by ancient seafarers to mark dangerous waters. You're not the first to stand here. There's dust, yes, but also a mug, half full, still warm. Now your heartbeat is louder than your steps. Here comes your mainstream fact for this section. One that's been whispered in planning departments for years beneath the World Trade Center site. There was a so-called deep basement project, an effort to sink foundational supports deeper than any other structure in Manhattan, tapping the hard Manhattan schist far below surface level. Some reports mention unexplainable rock anomalies and difficulty stabilizing certain sections, anomalies that were never formally recorded in public documentation. But according to an internal Port Authority memo recovered after the attacks, one engineer described non-anthropogenic chambers found during early excavation. That means not man-made. It was dismissed, redacted from official statements, but the whisper remains. You circle the room. Terminals line the walls dusty, inert, but intact. CRT screens with faded logos, a blend of Port Authority seals, and something more cryptic, 3 interlocking circles overlaid on a grid. A menu blinks weakly on one screen. Subsurface Node B, elevation, 42.6 status standby. It hits you then. This isn't just a storage room or forgotten utility chamber. This is a control room, but for what you tap keys, just a test. The screen jumps slightly, lines of static. Then a flicker of diagram overlays the outline of a massive foundation grid. And deep within it, something labeled Node C, inactive since 1973. You zoom in. The node is located almost directly beneath where the North Tower once stood. There's a note beside it. Conduit status dormant. Rituality. Index 0.43. Rituality. That's not engineering language. You lean back, unsettled. Whatever this place was designed for, it wasn't mere infrastructure. This was intentional mystery, built into the foundation of one of the world's most iconic landmarks. Here's your fringe tidbit. An urban explorer in the early 80s claimed to have stumbled on a cold, glowing room deep beneath the Trade Center's sub-basement levels. He said he saw floating diagrams projected into space without screens, and that a voice not his own whispered numbers in his mind. His blog was taken down, his photos disappeared. He later recanted, but not before uploading a single image, a triangular room with curved walls, and no visible source of light eerily similar to the space you are now standing in. You shiver not from cold, but from awareness. This chamber, this Foundation Zero, was not built by accident. It's a node, a pivot, a keystone set into the literal bones of Manhattan. And the files you found, they weren't just records. They were instructions. Historians still argue whether any part of the original World Trade Center was designed with esoteric influence. Some claim the buildings were modeled on ancient twin pillar symbology, referencing the Boaz and Jachin columns of Solomon's Temple. Others say that's just numerological fluff, but standing here among these symbols, those debates don't feel so fringe anymore. The atmosphere thickens. Your flashlight dims. You check the battery still full, but something pulls at the light, as if this room doesn't like exposure. You move slowly toward the central platform. Etched into its surface are concentric rings, carved deep into the steel. The inner ring bears a single word in faded paint. Dormire, Latin. You remember enough to know it means to sleep. You place your hand on the center. Nothing happens, but in your chest, a soft vibration begins, like a silent bell ringing not in your ears but in your bones. A vision flickers in your mind, fleeting, intrusive. A bird's eye view of the Twin Towers, not standing tall but as outlines, etched into a glowing network beneath the city. They were never just towers. They were markers, anchors. You pull your hand away, shaken. It stops, just like that. And now comes the sensory anchor, the one that ties you, body and soul, to this moment the faintest smell, rising from a nearby grate. Not smoke, not mildew, but pine, fresh pine, like a forest floor after rain. Impossible here, yet undeniably real. A memory, a bleed from somewhere deeper. You're not sure, but the scent grounds you, and just in time, because the door you came through, it closes behind you. Soft click, and with it, the room begins to shift, not mechanically but perceptually, like your brain can't quite grasp the angles anymore. The floor tilts ever so slightly. The air feels reversed, exhaling rather than inhaling. You back away, back toward the center. Your flashlight flares once and dies. Dark, total. And just as your breath starts to quicken, another door opens, not behind you, below you. A spiral staircase descends, lit by pulsing blue light. And faintly, barely, you hear music. Not modern, not digital, but something like a lullaby played on glass bells. You start to descend, not because you want to, because you must. Something is waiting, and it's been waiting a long time. The first step feels like air too light, too fragile, like it might vanish if you hesitate. But the second holds firm, humming faintly under your feet. You keep going, spiraling down the staircase lit in that surreal, pulsing blue. The light isn't consistent. It seems to dim when you look directly at it and brighten when your eyes drift. It's as if it prefers not to be observed. The music gets clearer with each step. Glass bells, yes, but not random. There's rhythm, structure. A lullaby? Maybe, but one written in some alien key. Strangely familiar, yet impossible to hum. You reach a landing, and a narrow archway opens ahead into a corridor unlike anything you've passed through before. The walls are smooth, seamless, and curved. No bricks, no bolts, no seams. They pulse faintly with light like veins filled with slow-moving fire. A soft breeze brushes your cheek, carrying that same pine-sweet scent from before, mixed now with the faintest trace of something older, like sun-warmed parchment and cooling candle wax. It's not just a hallway. It feels like a throat, a living passage. You continue forward, the hush almost reverent. Then a chamber, wide, silent, circular, of course, but this one isn't industrial. No steel, no rust. The floor is polished stone slate, dark, veined with gleaming white lines that form a massive spiral under your feet. In the center stands a single object, a pillar, maybe 10 feet tall, carved from translucent crystal, faintly glowing from within. You draw closer. The surface of the crystal is etched intricate grooves spiraling upward, forming words in dozens of scripts: Latin, Arabic, Sanskrit, cuneiform, and others you don't recognize. Some that might not even be human. You run your fingers over them. They're smooth, but you can feel the language vibrating faintly beneath your skin, like a whisper in your bones. You don't understand the words. Not exactly, but the feeling that you recognize. Waiting, watching, protecting. This place, it's not just an archive. It's not a vault, it's an anchor. Mainstream fact time, brace yourself in the architectural plans for the original Twin Towers. The bedrock foundation slab was referred to unofficially by some engineers as the bathtub. It was 70 feet deep and wrapped in a massive slurry wall to hold back the Hudson River. After 9/11, that wall cracked, but still holding was seen by some as a symbol of survival. But here's the real kicker. A handful of pre-1970 blueprints include mysterious void spaces in the deepest levels, zones marked access, restricted with no plumbing, no wiring, no mechanical purpose. You're standing in one of those voids now. Fringe theory alert. Some believe these chambers were deliberately embedded as energetic balancers. Based on obscure architectural principles, think feng shui meets sacred geometry. A foundation meant not just to bear weight, but to ground something else. You circle the crystal pillars slowly. The back is smooth, no carvings. But as you pass the midpoint, your vision distorts again. For a moment, the entire chamber seems to telescope away, like you're looking down a tunnel of infinite versions of yourself. Then it's gone. You blink hard, heart racing, and you see something you missed before. Just behind the pillar, half shrouded in darkness, a chair, simple, wooden, facing the crystal. Someone used to sit here. There's an indentation in the stone floor where the legs wore down over time. And on the seat, dusty, brittle, is a book. Leather bound, no title. You open it slowly, inside drawings. Not text, spirals, towers, circles within circles. Sketches of people standing beneath the World Trade Center, looking upward and downward. Some pages are filled edge to edge with hand-scribbled numbers. Others show diagrams of stars aligned with Manhattan landmarks. One shows a split diagram on one side, the Twin Towers. On the other, two massive trees, roots connecting both images beneath the surface. Historians still argue whether these kinds of diagrams found in the margins of old Masonic texts and city planning sketches hold symbolic meaning or just eccentric decoration. But here, now, in this place, they feel like instructions. You flip to the last page, a single word drawn in thick, black ink. Remember, you close the book, and you realize what this chamber really is. Not a basement, not a secret. A memory core, not digital, but symbolic. A place built to anchor ideas. Protect something abstract, a story, a dream, a warning. You look up, and then, as if timed to your breath, the light in the crystal dims, the pillar hums, and from somewhere deep beneath you, far deeper than any construction crew ever dug, you feel it. Movement, not tremor, not danger, awakening. The music returns. Fainter now, like it's coming from underwater. You back away. The air behind you stirs. The corridor has reappeared, open again. Somehow, you know it won't stay open for long. You glance once more at the pillar, still, silent, but never asleep. And then you turn. You follow the passage back the way you came, though it feels slightly different now. The light warmer, the walls less foreign, like the place has accepted you, like it said what it needed to say. You pass through the white door, now ajar. The tracks, the vault, the mahogany crates. You walk past them all, and as you rise through the ancient layers of tunnel and bedrock, the world above draws nearer, louder. Yes, but somehow lighter, and in your chest, that quiet hum remains, not ominous, just present, like the feeling of standing on sacred ground, because now you know what lies beneath, not just pipes and trains and forgotten archives, but memory and myth, and something that might still be waking up. You return now to the surface, your steps soft on the pavement, your ears slowly readjusting to the buzz of the waking city above. Traffic echoes in the distance. Voices murmur, and the scent of exhaust replaces the strange sweetness from below. But something in you is different. As you move through the streets, you notice small things, lines in the sidewalk that mirror the spirals. Rusted grates shaped just slightly like sigils. The gentle hum of machinery beneath your feet. They were always there. But now you see them. The world hasn't changed, but your understanding of it has. You pause beside a construction site. Metal fences rattle gently in the wind. A sign reads, "Subsurface utility access only." You smile. Maybe. Or maybe something more. That thought settles into you like a blanket. Not heavy, just warm enough. You carry it with you as you head toward bed, the hum in your chest fading into your heartbeat. The memory of blue light behind your eyelids. You remember the spiral, the pillar, the word etched in black ink. Remember, sleep approaches slowly, the edges of the day softening, the mystery folding itself gently away. Ready to be dreamt again some other night. What was under the Twin Towers before they fell? More than steel, more than stone. Something still alive. Something still dreaming. Good night and sweet dreams.